We're being joined by Dr. Odubanjo, who is the Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Academic of Science and the past chairman of the Lagos chapter of the Association of Public Health Physicians of Nigeria. Dr. Odubanjo, glad to have you join us on the LXN this morning.
My pleasure. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Great. So now let's talk about malaria, because today is a special day dedicated to have this kind of advocacy. But first of all, I would like you to do an estimation of the fight against malaria in Africa. How far have we gone? What are some of the concerns, and what level are we, and what should we do on a special day like this to ensure that we accelerate the fight against malaria?
Well, thank you. I think the key thing to note is that over 90% of the problem called malaria is in Africa. I think that's the major thing for all of us to take note of. So whether you're talking about the burden of disease, that is the number of cases, or you're talking about, mortality, the people who die, 90% or more of all of this happens in Africa. In fact, 50% happens in West Africa, largely, almost 50% in West Africa. So it's a huge problem in Africa. The thing historically to note also is that this was a bigger problem in Asia. It was even a problem in Europe. But things have changed over the years. And why Africa is so special is because we have a different set of players on the continent. So that makes eliminating it in Africa a bigger problem than what we've seen happen in Europe, and what we are seeing happening in Asia. So we have a special agent who carries the vector, who carries the parasite, the malaria parasite, which is the mosquitoes that we have, special agents. We have a different or more difficult, more virulent, more stronger disease causing agent or type of malaria parasite on the continent. And unfortunately also we have weaker infrastructure to deal with the problem. And of course we have fewer resources to deal with the problem on the continent. So we have a tougher enemy to deal with on the continent, and yet we have fewer resources to deal with that enemy. And that's the peculiarity of the problem in Africa. And that's why Africa today retains over 90% of the problem of malaria. Thank you.
Aside from Africa being a tropical region, what are the reasons why the disease burden is quite high in Africa? Is it about the environment, the attitudes to the environment, or even the limited access to treatments?
Yes, so actually that's good. I did mention it, somewhat the reasons why we have the bigger problem or the higher burden. But you've also just put in the last one, which is the tropical, weather that we have. So the weather is one, but apart from that, like you said, I mentioned weaker infrastructure, which means just the general level of development. So you look at what your housing looks like. You look at what your urban planning is like. You look at, do you have drainages? How dirty the environment is, where you have all kinds of things thrown around, and these things will become pools for water, where mosquitoes can actually breed. So those are all factors involved. So when I say weaker infrastructure, that is packaged inside of that. So we have that problem, and of course, when we talk about the resources that we have fewer resources or lower resources. Then we're talking about our access, to treatment, which our access to even now the vaccines that are coming on board, our access to the old preventive methods known, your your insecticide treated nets and all of that. Why do we have lower access? Again, because of lower resources. Because if you say on average, these things like the vaccines, will cost about $2 to $4 per person. Sounds like not much, but when you take $2 to $4 per person, or take $4 for a person, and you multiply that, that's in Nigeria today is almost 600 naira. So if you say 600 naira for you to get, one vaccine, you need 3 shots. This is somebody who's looking to eat to start with. And if you make that a public health drive, meaning that on top of everything else the government is dealing with, they will have to add this cost on top of that for millions of Nigerians. And then the question arises, what about the other health challenges? What about our educational challenges? What about security challenges that are all demanding for the same resources that we say are not available? So these are the factors that we're dealing with. And like I said earlier, on top of that, the mosquitoes that we're dealing with in Africa are tougher than what they dealt with in Europe and in Asia. The parasite, there are at least 4 types that are well known, but in fact, we have the worst type, most prevalent on the continent, which is the falciparum. So we are dealing with a tougher enemy, but we have all kinds of issues, from environmental issues to our systems, our health systems not being as organized and strong as they should be, to us not having the resources we need to be able to procure the kinds of preventive treatments and therapeutic treatments that we need to deal with this enemy properly.
All right, interestingly, we have another guest here with us in the studio. The more the merrier, and the conversation is getting bigger and better. We also have the privilege of hosting Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu, who is the CEO of Medway Health Limited. Glad you have joined us this morning.
Femi, nice to see you. I hope you've not had malaria for some time. I feel it seems that you are actually immune from malaria.
It's often said prevention is better than cure, so I'm preventing it. And doing better in that area.
Yeah, lucky you. You are not experiencing the inequality, which is a huge challenge in malaria elimination today in Nigeria, or even all over the world. Because in reality, what we're facing is a multi-dimensional challenge that touches on equality, both gender equality, both poverty, environmental equality, access to money, and then even economic opportunities. That's what malaria has become now. But for you, a big boy, malaria won't touch you. But when you go down to those villages around Lagos, we see what malaria actually does, especially to children and pregnant women. We hope we understand all these key issues. We hope, honestly, that we understand. Because in reality, we stay here, we try to talk about malaria a lot, which is nice. We need to even talk the more. But it's just like the word that flows and passes through your ear and nobody is actually, taking a serious bite, a serious look at it. Here we are.
But let's look at it critically. Talking about resources to fight malaria or even prevent it, how much of access do people have, especially in Africa? You talk about people in the city or people who can afford some of these drugs. But let's look at people who are in the remote areas, villages, Africa, tropical areas, and the peculiarity of our weather makes them vulnerable to this disease. When it comes to distribution of resources, would you say it's evenly distributed?
Obviously not. We see the effect mainly on those people that are actually having challenges. What I mean is that they are disadvantaged in a way. Under 5 children, they are disadvantaged. Of course, malaria kills 1 under 5 children every hour, so it's a huge number. Pregnant women, of course, most of the time they have the complication of malaria. People that don't have money, extreme poverty, less than $1 earning in a day is prevalent. Nigeria, extreme poverty, more than 2/3 of the population. That's the statistics now. And then the malnutrition, 35 million severely malnourished children in Nigeria, which also interact to cause the mess. And then here we're having extreme of climates, Human beings encroaching into the natural habitat of those organisms. We're using water, even the few water we have, we're all fighting over the water. And with that, all those activities, kind of increase the incidence and prevalence of malaria in the country. So when you're talking about Nigeria statistics, first and foremost, it's a difference in between the urban and rural area. Then it's a difference between the northern and southern part of Nigeria. okay? Because when you are looking at your negative health indices, first, you move north. Secondly, you move rural, even if you are in the south. So how have we been able to build, to actually integrate and look at this? It's a huge problem. Because if you need to deal with malaria, there are pillars of dealing with malaria. Probably will come to that. You need health and human resources. You need that. And of course, you know what it means that barely you don't have up to 30,000 doctors in Nigeria. Everybody wants to run away. Even the nurses are running away. Everybody. IT guys are running away. Everybody wants to run away from Nigeria. And then you are figuring if malaria, if it's going to cost you like more than ₦1 trillion, malaria is costing you ₦1 trillion every day, and you have to use about ₦2 trillion to fight malaria. You know what that means in terms of finance in Nigeria, where economy is going down. So I was thinking that with the inauguration, you know, of the Nigeria Malaria Elimination Council, okay, headed by Dangote about 2 years ago, that we'll have seen a lot of traction in the fight against malaria. But here we are, we're still struggling. Even as Buhari did that and we move into this new government, lots of issues. Malaria is the least of our problem now. I mean, it's a big problem for us, but it's the least of the things we want to focus on now at the level of government. The conversation, if we don't get to what malaria did, the conversation is like subdued. Nobody wants to really talk about malaria as we should be talking about that. And the critical place of interaction is at the primary healthcare center. Now, we have like maybe 30,000 or thereabouts primary healthcare centers all over the nation. 8,000 of them are working in a way. Recently, the president chose to look for champions, what we call, that can actually work for that, the primary healthcare centers. But again, if you are going to call those people to come and work as drivers of those things, it's going to cost you money, it's going to cost you some comfort. And it's worsened by the fact that we're having a lot of insecurity. And that, again, speaks to those inequality in malaria fights. A lot of insecurity, internally displaced people, people in IDP, in the camps, who have no access to proper health care. You have to go there regularly and do health intervention for them. So these are the drivers. It's actually multifaceted. So that's where we are.
Now, some of these factors you've talked about, let's look at the consequences of some of these factors. So there's low economic power, and then there's the environment, which makes people more susceptible to coming down with malaria. We'll find situations where people become self-acclaimed doctors for themselves. They diagnose, they treat by themselves. If they want to go to the laboratories, well, the cost of a lab test, research shows that it has increased by 100%. This self-diagnosing, self-treatment that a lot of people do for malaria, how does it impact the fight against malaria?
Well, what it does is that there could be a lot of misdiagnosis, obviously. 60% of the out-of-pocket expenses of the household is actually used to, treat malaria. So you are not having finance. The national health insurance is not really going deep down. Maybe they're doing 5% or 6% now of the coverage. Before it used to be about 2%, maybe 6%, maximum 8%. That's what the national health insurance is doing. So we'll not be able to really figure how to even spend the little money we have to deal with that. Now, it is actually a Herculean task to deal with malaria without structured finance, without human resources, without political commitment from government, without governance at the individual level, governance at the local level, without even thinking about our environment. If you look at it, malaria is an interaction between two animals and one parasite in an environment. Okay, human being, a mosquito, a parasite, Plasmodium, in a complex environment that population is increasing, we're encroaching, we're not taking proper care of the environment, where climate change is occurring. It's a complex environment that we have to really do it model to figure out how we can do it. But like I said, in many fora, Seychelles, Mauritius, Lesotho, even Iraq eliminated malaria. Okay, Algeria, all these guys that are not, shouldn't be up to Nigeria, eliminated malaria. Since they've gotten to zero transmission. What we mean by, when we are saying elimination, let's get the flow. First and foremost, there's a control for malaria. In control, you reduce the number of cases of malaria, you reduce the number of deaths, you reduce the number of mortality from malaria, okay? That is, you are controlling. But when you move to pre-elimination, you want to ensure that malaria does not become a problem, and whereby it will be difficult for the virus, for the vector, which is mosquito this time, to transmit the plasmodium, okay, the causative agent, to human. So, and you have to have zero transmission for 3 years, 3 consecutive years. Once that is done, good, you have what we call elimination. And then you have to prevent the reintroduction of that germ into the human community. So if those countries can do it, why can't we do it? Okay? Now, even if we are looking at that Nigeria, we cannot do it nationwide. Okay? Why can't Lagos Island do it where you are? Okay? Because this thing are just things you do, incrementally. When all of us, because all of us are not going to get to elimination of malaria one day worldwide, but when everybody gets to that, we are now at the level of eradication, and that means no malaria, which is possible. But in Nigeria, instead of looking wholly, I'm talking about strategy now, looking at, okay, it must be off in Kano, off in Sokoto, off in Yenagoa. Why can't one state, which is Abuja Federal Capital Territory, mobilize human resources, mobilize funds, mobilize everything? I said, listen, in FCT, in the next 3 years, I won't have malaria transmission. So then you have now to be dealing with reintroduction. So we have to think local. If you want to actually get this thing on, we have to think local. I don't see why Lagos State should have problem, at least in some critical local government, to deal with malaria. Lagos State can start the experiment, for instance, whereby you know that Lagos, from that, what's it called, Cotonou boundary, down to Ogun State boundary, where Dangote companies. It's a small place that you can use to do a lot of experiment and look at how do I, actually move from control to pre-elimination level, okay? And then what are you doing? Vector control, adequate diagnosis, proper treatment, prevention, okay? Is that not what you're doing? And then surveillance. How difficult could this be? I don't know.
All right, let's get back to Dr. Odubanjo now. I hope you can hear me, Dr. Odubanjo.
Loud and clear.
Great. Glad to know you're still there with us. Now,
Thank
the
you.
theme for this year's celebration is accelerating the fight against malaria. Now, if you look at the critical issues, some of the issues raised by Dr. Tuyi talked about the need to localize the fight against malaria. If we're going to take that narrative in Africa and by extension Nigeria, how do we localize the fight against malaria so that we can accelerate this, which is the essence of having a conversation on a day like this?
Well, if you ask me, I'll say that first, you must be able to identify what are your peculiarities. What are the challenges that you have peculiarly where you are, and some of those things I was referring to earlier on. Because it's very easy sometimes in public health we talk about locally applicable solutions. When you start looking and you just compare places, so people say, oh, they eradicated in this place, they eradicated or eliminated in that place. The questions arise. What kind of vector of the disease were they dealing with? That's what agent carries the disease organism. What kind of disease organism were they dealing with? What were their peculiar environmental challenges, such as your weather? What are they, and when I say that, they're not just challenges, but you also can twist that around and look at advantages. So you must learn to do things locally, and think about your peculiarities. Now, I think that one of the recent things, just to make a quick comparison, one of the recent events that showed us very clearly that that is the way to go was the management of COVID, the COVID outbreak, the epidemic, clearly the pandemic rather. Clearly, we saw huge differences around the world in the results that they got and in the approaches, and that is important. So, for instance, in a place like South Africa, one of the approaches to dealing with COVID was that they banned the sale of alcohol. And people say, what has that got to do with anything? But they looked at their social infrastructure and realized that if you had alcohol sale going on, there'll be a lot of social interaction and mingling that will make the control very difficult. So they had to do that. Now, I don't know anywhere else where they did that, but they did it. So what am I saying? Is that just like Dr. Mebawondu said, you have to look at it and say, look, what are our peculiarities? You don't just take things, hook, line, and sinker and swallow them and say, this is what WHO said, is the vaccines we must use, is this we must use. No, you have to ask yourself, what really would work around here? So for instance, again, people have been given insecticide-treated net. It was given around places. Many studies have searched these things out and found that they went back to some of those places, and there were instances of people who were using it as fishing nets. There were instances of people who sold it as wedding gown. There were many instances, and people who just didn't use it at all. And questions arose, why not? And then people started giving them their answers. Some said, when I stay under it, I get very hot and very uncomfortable, so we can't use it. Some say, as simple as we don't even have a proper bed and where to hang that net around the bed. So very simple things, sometimes not complex solutions. So we have to look at it and say, okay, what can we do? And like you said, even locally, you have to look at certain areas and say to yourself, oh, in Victoria Land, in this and that, we already have good drainage systems or drainage systems that we can easily improve upon in order to try to reduce, minimize, eliminate whatever choice you want to take there, malaria in this place. And once we use that model here, these are the parts of that model we can translate to other local governments, or this is the one that will work here, this is the one that will work in the other place. So in one place, your main strategy is insecticide-treated nets. In another place, you are looking at, let's pursue the infrastructure first. In another place, you are looking at health education as your mainstay. It doesn't mean you are not using the other methods of prevention, but you are saying this is going to be the main one, and then the others will be supportive. In this other place, this is going to be the main one. The others will be supportive. So that's how you approach things in order to solve your problem. If you just take it all and say, oh, this is all we're told to do, like I pointed out earlier, people are now screaming, oh, thank God we now have a malaria vaccine. But we have forgotten the general challenges of vaccination. So thank God, yes, thank God there is a malaria vaccine. But what about the challenges of vaccination? We've had vaccines for other diseases for so long, but we've not been able to reach the percentage coverage that we need to reach. So would those same challenges apply to this new vaccine as well? So getting the vaccine alone is not the solution. So we have to start thinking about peculiarities. What's peculiar about our people? That means that it mandates a lot of research, ongoing research, to keep figuring out what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. And we should not be afraid to do our own things our own way. Thank you.
Talking about what needs to be done and treating or finding local solutions. Now, for those who practice traditional medicine, there are herbs that they brew, and many times those who use it and those who produce it talks about its effectiveness. Is it time to look in that direction, find a blend between traditional and orthodox medicine towards finding cure that works for people in this region?
Absolutely. There are many movements now, both regionally, when I say regionally in Africa, and locally. So even for the Nigerian government, most people do not know, but there are agencies set up to try to pursue that, to pursue our herbs and all of that, because Africa has rich biodiversity, Nigeria inclusive. Meaning that we have so much around us that works. And many of the drugs, if you look at the history of the development of drugs, many of them came from the plants that we have around us. So historically, that has been the origination before people went into laboratories to start synthesizing drugs after they discovered mostly what were the active agents that came from a natural world. So, for instance, you talk about your artemether, and then now we use the combination therapy that has artemether in it to treat malaria. Artemether came from the bark of a tree. Okay, but then it's because they discovered that it's difficult to grow a tree so quickly, to grow that tree so quickly, to have enough supply for the whole world that is looking for this treatment now, when we switch from chloroquine and all that. But people have been synthesizing in the laboratory, but it started from the plant. So the point is, we have a lot of those things. A lot of the things that people say work, they do work. There are also some that don't work. So what we need to do is have enough collaboration, and research to look into it and say, all these agents, all these herbs that you say are working, bring them. Let us test them. Let us put them through proper scientific methods of research and discover what exactly is the agent that is working in that leaf. Okay, because when you take a leaf and you boil it and all of that, and you drink it and your fever goes, your malaria seems to disappear and all of that, fantastic. In that leaf that you boiled, there might be 1,000 different agents that came out of that leaf from boiling. Which one of them was responsible for that action? You don't know. Or was it several of them? Maybe there were 50 of them working together that is responsible for that action. Now, you ask most of our people, they don't know. They just know that leaf works. So we need to take it beyond that to say, now that leaf works, but these are the 50 things inside the leaf that works. And when we extract those 50 things, how much of it do you really need to take? Do you need 2 leaves or you need 10 leaves? Now, if you needed 10 leaves and you say boil 10 leaves, what exactly was that quantity that was coming out of 10 leaves? So what is the grammage of the 50 agents that will really produce the result we want, that will not kill you or produce toxicity in you, but will just bring about the effect we want, which is the treating of the malaria? Now, those are all the things that need to be checked out properly. And then you get to the place where you can actually take that thing and begin to market it safely and say, take 1 tablet of this. You now put it in tablet forms or and you put it in capsules and whatnot. And you say, or even in syrups, take 1 spoon of this, because you have now taken it through proper scientific methods to narrow down what really works in that herb and narrow down how much of it exactly that you need. But we need a lot of that. We must also remember but the way things have been, and one of the reasons why malaria has been difficult to handle is because the agent, the parasite, it actually adapts very quickly. So one reason why it's taking so long to get a vaccine at all is because it just seems to modify and change and dodge the bullets that you prepare for it. So that's why we talk about the resistance to drugs, and that's why we will need this kind of research much more, because we'll find other things that work against the agent, against that parasite, and we'll be able to win that fight against malaria. Thank you.
All right. Let me bring in Dr. Mebawondu now. Talking about the issue of malaria vaccine, what level are we as a nation? What are some of the attendant challenges confronting the rollout of vaccines in Africa and by extension Nigeria? And what kind of research should take place to facilitate these malaria vaccines?
Well, Dr. Odubanjo actually, excited me with some of those submissions that even the vaccines we've had in this nation, many times, different type of vaccines. In fact, even in Lagos, we did some study in the riverine community of Lagos State, and we found that even vaccine penetration, even in Lagos, was less than, measles was less than 10%, even in Lagos, as urban and as small as Lagos is. So people have a lot of misgivings about vaccines, and we have to factor that in when you are trying to design health program, whether malaria, anything, in any part of the world. So for us, the first thing is this, that we know if vaccines work, we have to actually first of all test the the level of working in Nigeria. Well, yes, it has been done in Ghana, it has been done in Malawi and one other country in Africa, maybe Cameroon again, and then they're trying to do a rollout, especially for under 5. The essence of the vaccine is that it prevents severe form of the malaria, which is seen mainly in under 5 children. So, and because of that, it's okay, let us apply it. But we've seen factors, issues in vaccines that we remember when they were trying to test the vaccines for meningitis in Kano that left in the northern part of Nigeria. There are a lot of children, you know, actually damaged up to now. And we also know a lot of disinformation and misinformation about vaccines, especially the COVID vaccines, and then the role religious organization played in that. We also remember the rumor about vaccines reducing fertility in another part of Nigeria. Those were lies. So first and foremost, if you want to deploy vaccine in Nigeria, the first thing is to do your own study in the country. Do your own study and understand exactly how is this, what is the level of working of these vaccines. It's not that we don't have vaccine institutes in Nigeria, but of course, like every other thing, it's gone down. So we need to wake that one up. Acceptability, you have to actually work on acceptability because you are fighting a kind of rumor with another rumor. It's war of media, war of information. Religious leaders don't want to take the vaccines. The local people don't understand the vaccines. You are saying, come and take vaccines developed somewhere abroad. And a lot of story of how even the vaccines is developed is bringing the people, driving the people away from the vaccine. So you need to actually do that. And you have to involve the faith-based organizations or NGOs because this will have a lot of influence. The religious leader, the community leader, the faith-based organizations have a lot of influence on these people, their congregations. You have to actually be able to invite them and let them understand how we deploy the vaccine, why we deploy the vaccines, and what benefit we are going to get from it, why it's not contradictory to any of their belief. If you are not dealing with that, you just have the vaccines and you will not get it. Now, another bigger issue for which Dr. Odubanjo had actually mentioned, even as I was entering here, is the cost, okay? At the end of the day, we have to buy this vaccine, okay? We have to look for money in dollars and go and pay and get these vaccines. Without donor, essentially, it's difficult to do a lot of things, to do vaccination. We're entering the week of vaccination now. Yes, we're there. So it's difficult to do. We have to look for money for Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, from Global Alliance of Vaccine Initiative, Gavi guys, to actually bring money for us and even give the same vaccine to us. Okay? Now, people have a bit in this part of the world because the level of education, the level of exposure, the level of superstition driving the health system is very high. People are very reticent. They're very careful in taking vaccines from abroad. So what is wrong with us here, developing a vaccine and engaging people? In fact, in reality, part of the process of development of the vaccine, if you really want people to take it, you can bring some of those leaders to look at it, just observation. This is what we're doing. It's not harming you. We're not putting anything there. We're not reducing your fertility. We're not going to hurt you. We're not putting there. So this
just like what happened during COVID.
During the COVID, so we should have picked the lessons from the COVID. Now, I need to also speak to another issue concerning what should be the local way of actually eradicating malaria, what should be peculiar to us. If you find out in our own case that it's not even, what we need to do more is information, education in that regard, why malaria must go. And you are doing that at the level of your faith-based organization, NGOs, traditional institutions, okay? If you are doing that, because it is good. I appreciate the fact that you have to appoint rich people that have money, who are going to fight for their interests to head your malaria program because you are looking for money. I'm telling you, they are not the one who's going to ensure the adoption of those strategic preventive measures, okay? The adoption is going to happen at the local level, okay? Now, one of those incentives we have to consider is what I call, conditional cash transfers, where you have to look at the locality. Because around us, people, you'll be surprised what those tiny things can do. It's a kind of bribe to support for people for you to drive your health narrative. If a mother is having 3 children, the mother is a tailor, it's okay, don't worry. This is embrace family planning. clean your environment, do this. We're giving you 30,000 naira to support your sewing business for embracing these healthy behaviors. What can you do if you do? Because in reality, don't they encourage you to do even some of the work we're doing? So we have to actually strategically think of our system and look at how to drive that. But that will be an anathema, in Western world, that you are bribing money. Of course, even I remember in New York, for people to take vaccines, that they have to actually, down in Bronx, have to actually bribe some people in a way. They call it conditional cash transfer. So how do we apply it in our own case now to see that the critical health changes we want to see, we apply those conditional cash transfer to drive those changes? For me, it is essential. You have to look at the peculiarity. Because I remember we were doing a program in the riverine community of Ekpe, actually to understand the peculiar health system of the riverine community. And it was very, very enriching in understanding each of those communities, their differences, their fight, why they cannot go to the hospital in that, or primary health center in that or other community. If you don't consider all this, you put it, and a lot of primary health centers, big generator, beautifully built, equipped, we're not in a way, because there are key issues between those two communities. Nobody wants to move from this to another place. No matter everything you do there, they won't go. There are local which must be studied, and which, of course, Dr. Odubanjo has actually, alluded to in his discussion. And that comes to the point where you have to sit down and say that, okay, in this Agege local government, in Ekpe local government, we're having this, of course, data, very important. We're having this number of malaria, severe malaria is this and this. And we look at data, why should this be? And then you apply your interventions. You have the vector control, you have the environmental sanitation, you have the quick treatment, diagnosis, the quick diagnosis treatment. The cost of the anti-malaria now has gone up. People will definitely embrace herbs. But even for me, the choice of herbs is taken on that dimension. When Prince Charles said that, listen, I have prostate, I'm not going to use any medicine, that I'm going to use herb. So it's actually, ignites something in me that are we actually looking at those things sufficiently? But like Dr. Odubanjo said, we have to codify, we have to know what we're doing exactly. What India has done to Ayurveda, we must do to our own natural herb. And it's not difficult.
All right, still talking about vaccine. This is World Immunization Week, and it's a time where children are vaccinated. Now, bringing it home to Nigeria, mothers are usually encouraged to take their children from age 0 to 5 for vaccination. But like Dr. Tuyi has said, that even in Lagos State, vaccine penetration is low. Who would have thought about that? Could you speak to why vaccine penetration is low, and what should be the role of the primary health centers in driving immunization?
I think the challenge we have, Dr. Mebawondu was saying certain things now, and I think two of them primarily are the major challenges we have. One is the misgivings, about vaccines. So we meaning that we need a lot of health education. Recently, for instance, the federal government also introduced the HPV vaccine for girls and young women. And in all honesty, that came with a lot of pushback. And I looked at it and I said, who just announced the introduction of a vaccine without preparing people for it? You have to understand but not just in Nigeria, even in the Western world, there are people who are fighting the measles vaccine and all of that. So there's a lot of issues, where the vaccines are concerned. Vaccines have been proven to work, yes, but there are also a lot of misgivings. So when you want to improve the immunization, one of the primary things you must pay attention to is health education. In my interactions with governments, I can tell you that the health education unit usually suffers. So when you think of cutting budgets and all of that, that's a unit people think, oh, that's not that important. But it is very important because no matter how effective your vaccine is, if the people don't believe it, if you recall a few years back, the polio eradication drive in Nigeria almost came to a standstill, because there were some misgivings. A few leading people in the north, just made a video or two and said, this is what it is. They want to sterilize everybody. And the thing came to a halt, almost complete halt. And it took a lot of effort to restart the immunization, the polio drive, eradication drive again in the north. So health education is key, very important. We must get back to telling people what this is, how it works, sometimes showing them how it's produced. And actually, that also takes us to this talk that we've been having in recent times, which is local production of vaccines. Because there are many things that you take care of if you did them yourself. So a lot of the suspicion of sterilization, for instance, is because the vaccines have been imported. Dr. Mebawondu said that earlier on. They have been imported. So if we're actually producing, and I know that there's been a lot of back and forth and discussion and noise about that, and it increased when COVID came, but we need not to rest right now. We need to actually achieve that local production because that solves a lot of problems where acceptability is concerned. Now, the second thing that he did talk about was the role of those of primary health care, and in particular the primary health care centers. So if we had a very good health system and very functional primary health care services, around the country, that would take care of a lot of problems. So he talked about, for instance, the riverine areas, even in Lagos, that are very low penetration. Now, it's the job of a primary health care service in that area to find a way to penetrate. That involves a lot of things. Of course, it also involves a lot of resources because some of those places are called hard to reach areas, meaning that it's not very easy to get to. I don't just jump in my car and drive in there. I have to find a boat. And of course, with recent events, we start talking about safety. Are there good boats? Are there life jackets? All those become important because are you going to put the health worker there and say, yes, you need to reach the people, so he should jump on a boat and have no life jacket, so he should risk his own life and all of that. So there are many things involved, but the primary health care, an efficient primary health care system, takes care of those things because there will be provision for whatever is needed in order to reach the hard to reach area. Including if you have to remunerate the health workers that have to get to those difficult places, if you have to give them an extra hardship allowance or whatever you may want to call it, you do all that you need to. And those talk about the local solutions that we're saying, that everything demands local solutions. You must think about what is the real challenge in this place and do it differently as necessary in that place. But once we can take care of that, good health education and ensure very efficient primary health care service, we can increase the penetration of vaccination. Thank you.
Let's just talk about immunization, Dr. Mebawondu, which is supposed to be like a public health intervention. Now, according to data, the success story yearly has always been between 3 to 5 million lives being saved every year. But for us to make progress in this area of immunization, let's look at the peculiarity of Africa and Nigeria. What are some of the diseases that are so peculiar to Africa or Nigeria? And then this immunization initiative should be tailored towards them. And what will be the success level or the success story?
I had copious discussion with a lot of people those days in Uppsala. Uppsala is the northern part of Sweden, in the university where I attended then. The word conception of fighting, of limiting microbes or germs is actually fight. Let's fight this, let's fight that, let's fight that. And it came to me that, okay, we've observed that whenever we fight with drug, whenever we fight with this organism mutates and come back knowing that you are saying that, listen, you want fight, we'll give you fight. And then you find out at the end of the day, some of those critical molecules you are using to deal with those things are not working again. Okay? and that's how we lost chloroquine, lost a lot of molecules, even for malaria, and then we are now at ACT, which is also becoming a problem. If you go to another Asia, some Asia countries, you have to do a combination, combine this, with that to be able to deal with malaria. So the concept of the mentality that every time we have to fight, make those organisms also want to fight back, and good enough, immunization of vaccination created the middle part. We're not fighting you. If you enter us, you cannot kill us. Whatever you want to do. And for me, I have actually envisioned that the way forward to really limiting a lot of communicable diseases, or bacterial diseases, or even viral diseases, or infectious diseases, is to actually look of synergy. How do we live together? You won't kill me, I won't kill you. At least for the next maybe 100 years, I want to live on this earth. And nicely, we move to immunization, we move to vaccination, as the case may be. Now, that became a problem because for me to put part of organism in me to prevent the family from entering to me and cause disease comes with a lot of problem. It's a kind of symbiosis living. Either part of the organism or even attenuated or weakened part of the organism or a molecule of the organism is put in me to do that. And that's the beauty for me. That's the beauty of immunization. Now, Dr. Odubanjo alluded to some of those things. Produce your things locally. Be transparent in the production, especially people that are going to do the influence. Talk. The lowest hanging fruit we have in this country to fight jam is education. It's health education, health literacy. Because if you understand the perspective from which I'm working, you will really want to work with me to help yourself. Okay? But there's a lot of arrogance on the part of health workers. I'll blame us. When we wear that work coat, and put on tie, we do like this and think that we know all. No, you don't know all. And I will give a critical example of Olikoye. One of the doctors saw in the clinic, a little boy, the mother tied one bead around him. This is the bead that prevents the boy from dying. And the one that said, what kind of this superstition is this? And caught it. And of course, the boy died. And Olikoye was mad and said that, what is your business? What is your problem? What is your problem? Science must understand that there are things they don't understand. We must be able to be humble enough. And also the traditional people must understand that there are also things they don't understand. It's not a fight. When it's a fight, it creates a lot of tension, a lot of attrition and problems. So that's, for me, bringing it to vaccines, first and foremost, let us produce. Let's educate people appropriately. Let's engage those stakeholders, critical stakeholders, in time to deal with those vaccines. And you're looking at the diseases that are killing us mostly. We're losing our children, too many of them, because of these childhood diseases. Most of them are vaccine-preventable diseases. The measles of this world, the pneumonias, diarrheas, of course, which all of them have their own vaccines that you can use. And then now, malaria now has gotten vaccines. These are the bigger diseases that are actually killing us. Now people are developing vaccine against some specific cancer. Human papilloma virus is supposed to prevent cervical cancer in a lot of, but you have to take it before certain age, usually at around the age of 13 or so that before you get exposed to sexual, you have taken it in and prevented the cervical cancer. The research will keep going on until we start figuring out a lot of vaccines. But right away, if, for instance, we can deal with malaria, if, for instance, we can deal with those vaccine-preventable diseases in childhood, we've done a lot. We'll have saved a lot of money, a lot of life, enhance our quality, push for our economic growth in a way uncommon. And one of the factors that encourage multiple number of children is the fact that we don't know which one is going to survive. If you have two and you know they're going to survive, you won't bother to have many. Okay? So, in many ramifications, once you deal with those childhood diseases, VP, vaccine-preventable diseases of childhood, and you add HPV and add malaria to it, you've done a lot in the country. Then we'll be talking about non-communicable diseases like diabetes, hypertension, and co.
All right, let's wrap up with Dr. Odubanjo. Now, looking at the treatment of malaria, the anti-malaria drug market is very, very huge. For Nigeria alone in 2021, report has it that Nigeria imported anti-malaria drugs worth over 109 billion naira. But fake drugs is a problem. Some persons can afford the anti-malaria drug, but when they buy it, it's not a real one. So what can be done about the fight against fake drugs? And speak to some of the practices that people still do that encourage the dominance of malaria in the tropical region.
Well, so when we talk about drugs, it will take us right back to the value of local production. One of the things that I learned, a while back, really helped me was to believe in the local things that were produced, particularly in that case, local drugs. It's the mentality that you go to the pharmacy and you want the one that was imported. I think pricing is also helping us to think locally now. However, before then, with the fake drug matter, I did have a conversation once with those in the industry and regulators and things. And the person told me and said, it's better you buy this one that was made in Nigeria. And I said, why? I said, because if this is wrong and this is fake and all of that, or they do not produce it well, he says it's easier for us to deal with it. We can catch them because we know who they are, we know where they are. He said, but these ones that you imported, we don't really have much power over it. The best we have is how we regulate at the borders, and of course things slip into every border in the world. Every border, people, circumvent the customs, circumvent the drug agent, regulatory agencies and all that. You can minimize it, but it's never zero. So local production can help us deal with fake a lot more, because with the local production, you can remember, for instance, years ago, there was a case of a producer or a manufacturer in China who manufactured, I think that was baby milk or so, that was contaminated and killed several babies. The guy was caught and executed. Now, that's the power of local production. You can catch the people. You know who they are, you know where the factory is and all of that. But everything that's labeled as imported, you don't even know whether it's really imported. There is no real factory here or factory address to catch and all of that. So it's more difficult. So with that, we must work harder. And of course, it also speaks to our general attitude as a people, which is that we always say if it's foreign, it's better. So we encourage that kind of behavior. We encourage people to go fake things. And in fact, they fake it so well now that they go to the producer abroad and tell them to make it substandard. And those ones will make it for them, as long as they are not going to use it in their country. It's been packaged and sent to you in Nigeria. So we all have a part to play in that regard, in helping, and we all, of course, need to be able to go to the standard pharmacy store. So even things like buying in the open markets where people go and buy drugs, even drugs are being hawked. We all need to dissuade such activity and focus on dealing with the professionals. So where are the proper pharmacy stores? Let us patronize them, because I did have also an interaction with my pharmacist, my pharmacy shop, and I asked them and I said, look, if I have a problem with this, what happens? They said, no, just tell us. They said, because we can track it right back all the way to our sources, how we get it. We have the chain. We can trace that chain back, and we can discover and report it all the way back, and something will be done about it. So that's why we also have to encourage professionalism, and ensure that it's not every trader that should be selling drugs just like that because they have the money to open a shop. Okay. I think once we do that and we all pay attention to some of these things personally, our own personal responsibility, and then as a government encourage the local manufacturing, create the environment that ensures that the local manufacturers can do more and produce more, more drugs. And that also means that we also have to support more research, because what most of our manufacturers are doing at the moment, and I now speak from the perspective of an Academy of Science, what most of our manufacturers are doing at the moment is just to replicate, the patents that are now freely available. Because when somebody discovers something is patented, you cannot produce that thing, for a number of years. It's until those number of years are expired, then you can now start producing that drug anywhere. Then you have the cheaper alternatives, which India usually takes a lot of advantage of to give us cheap drugs all over the world. However, you want to be able to discover your own drugs and patent them, and that takes a lot of support for research. And we have institutes like the Pharmaceutical Research and Development. We need to fund a lot of those. We even have the Natural Medicine Development Agency right there in Lagos. So we need to support all of those agencies so that we start producing, researching, finding our own drugs for our own problems. Not, for instance, if you had to treat cancer, very expensive. But are we saying that we cannot find cancer treating agents in Nigeria, discover them locally, patent them, and produce them locally? Once we can do some of those things, then cost will drop. Then we will automatically be dealing with fakes as well, because we are not dealing with unknown, entities. When we start talking about drug production, we will now be dealing with our own people who are producing them, and they will be held to the highest standard that is required in order to produce or treat properly. Thank you. I think that was one thing I left out, but I don't remember that anymore. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Odubanjo, we most appreciate you for your time and your thoughts. No doubt you've done justice to the topic for conversation, and let's hope that Nigeria will do better when it comes to the fight against malaria. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, let's wrap up with Dr. Mebawondu in the studio as we give your final thoughts on the issue of malaria drugs, the prevalence of fake malaria drugs, and then you have manufacturers too who are struggling in business. What kind of incentive can be done to encourage drug manufacturing in Nigeria?
Well, first, the starting point is still, at the regulatory level, okay? What you call active pharmaceutical ingredients, we don't produce, okay? And you have to rely on a lot of people in Asia and co to get you active pharmaceutical ingredients that you now mix with starch or whatever to do your formulation. We need to do a lot of work in that regard. And then these are not cheap business endeavor, okay? Recently, government mentioned support, in terms of financial support for those production. We need to really wrap that up. NAFDAC is doing a lot of pharmacovigilance. They need to be empowered, giving money. At the level of the community, we need to educate people. When greed is driving a country, it's a big problem because everybody thinks that all things is about money. And they do anything to get that money. They fake drugs, they fake everything, cosmetic, drugs, everything. They fake because they want money. Government must be able to really clearly show examples. Because when people do things and they can get away with it, you encourage other people to do such, okay? So government must be able to deal with those people involved in fake drugs. They have to be vigilant. Pharmacovigilance is very critical in dealing with fake anti-malaria. I remember that, it was then a code system that you send and it tells you that this drug is authentic, manufactured by those people. I hope they've not infiltrated that. But as long as majority of those drugs are manufactured locally, if ordinary, malt drink you take, if you look at the process involved in production, if you look, I've entered factories, I've looked at this thing, the laboratories, everything is equivalent. So when you just see something being produced, it's not easy. But when you see a lot of those foreign things being brought in, they will actually, especially those expensive medication, they fake them, they bring them into the country, they don't care. I think those guys should face the worst punishment like economic saboteur. If you have to fake drug and give to people, especially anti-malaria, that you know that malaria is one of the biggest killer of children in this country. So we keep, and then we just have to keep the conversation ongoing, educate people, talk to them the language they understand, convert some of those billboards that's advertising beer and alcohol to health literacy platform, talking about, this is what Malaria Day, This is what you can do to prevent yourself from getting malaria. This is, if you have problem, this is the number you can call. Why are we not seeing a flash of those kind of things while driving around a center like Lagos or Port Harcourt or even Kano?
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu, for being in the studio with us talking about malaria as it is World Malaria Day. Dr. Tuyi Mebawondu is the CEO of Medway Health Limited. Thank you. And the message with which you wrapped up is very key. Constant reminders of things everyone can do to fight malaria, not just on this day, but it should be a continuous thing.
Fight malaria comes by hearing.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.